Welcome to Caregiving Club On Air. This podcast is dedicated to the millions of family caregivers who want wellness tips and self-care solutions, who seek expert advice, and who want news about healthy aging and how to create well home design in our forever homes. I'm Sherri, a corporate gerontologist, author, and educator, a TV interviewer, host, and news commentator. I'm joining you from Southern California, where our interviews and news take us all across the country to explore the many ways to help you on your caregiving journey and to lift you up here at Caregiving Club On Air. Welcome to Caregiving Club On Air. In this episode, we are going to cover World Alzheimer's Month, also National Fall Prevention Awareness Week with our special guest, Steve Popovich of Theora Care. We're also going to focus on National Emergency Preparedness Month, talk a little bit about dementia-friendly design, and also celebrate International Podcast Day with some information that we can't wait to share with you. So I'm your host, Sherri. I'm a gerontologist and author. And as I said last episode, we had so much stuff going on in September, we had to cut it into two different episodes. So this is the second of our September episodes that we're offering to you. And our guest today is going to be Steve Popovich. As I mentioned, he is the founder CEO of Theora Care. And they have just really great news to share with us. First of all, they're a caregiving solutions company that uses advanced technology like artificial intelligence, AI, and neural networking. And they have a lot of really great wearables and other advanced technologies to help family caregivers and older loved ones. And it's particularly pertinent, I think, for this episode because Steve's going to share with us a really wonderful story that just broke in Detroit news about a gentleman with Alzheimer's who was wearing one of their products, a smartwatch. And then he's also going to share some new news with us about a new falls detection and also possibly prevention service that they've just launched. And it's really exciting. So you're going to want to pay attention and stay tuned for that interview that's coming up. So in caregiver wellness news, as I mentioned, it's World Alzheimer's Month. It's also World Alzheimer's Day on September 21st. I'm going to share with you the recent research from the Alzheimer's Association International Conference that just happened in July. Lots of really interesting new things, new trends, new research. And I think you're going to want to stay tuned because you may or may not have heard some of this in the news. We want to get all of this to you because I think it helps us both as caregivers for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia, but also in terms of our own brain health, which, by the way, at the end of the episode, we will be doing our Me Time Monday Wellness Hack on 7 hacks of lifestyle choices we can make that are going to help us with brain health and also possibly prevent Alzheimer's later in life. But also in World Alzheimer or in Caregiver Wellness News, we're going to talk a little bit about, again, Falls Prevention Week. I've got some really great resources for you, some things to think about, and also just some stories about falling and older adults and what we can do to help keep our loved ones safe. Then as we turn to Well Home Design News, we're going to talk about dementia-friendly design in the home. We're also going to focus on emergency preparedness. As I said, September is the time that we think about how do we keep our family safe. And when we think about older loved ones, whether they're living at home and whether they're living alone or they're just more vulnerable, more frail, or whether they're in senior living, having an emergency preparedness plan is really important. So we're going to take you through the steps on that. And also we've got some freebies for you in this particular episode that I'll mention as we go through everything. Then we return to our pop culture segment because we brought that back. Last episode, we talked about the movie Thelma, which, by the way, if you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. And then in this episode, I'm going to give a little movie review on Reagan, the new movie on the former president, Ronald Reagan. And it makes sense because the movie just came out. But also, as you know, President Reagan was the first national, actually worldwide figure to announce that he had Alzheimer's disease back in 1994. So we're going to touch upon that. And then, as I said, we are going to do our Me Time Monday Wellness Hack at the end on brain health and how to prevent Alzheimer's disease. So with that, let's take a look at our Caregiver Wellness News. So, as I mentioned, September is World Alzheimer's Month, and September 21st is actually World Alzheimer's Day. And I'm going to have a graphic on our episode guide page, but essentially, right now in the US, there are 7 million Americans who are living with dementia, about 11 million Americans who are family caregivers to those people with dementia. And then globally, there's 10 times that amount. There's 70 million people who are currently living with Alzheimer's or dementia. And so those numbers are going to grow. This is certainly a global phenomenon, a global, epidemic, if you want to call it, because we're going to go from 7 million in the US to 13 million by 2050, which is just in 26 years. And also in 2050, we're going to go globally from 70 million to about 139 million people worldwide. Big numbers, lots to think about. Now, one of the things that you're going to find in our Me Time Monday Wellness Hack at the end of this episode is some of the science that is around lifestyle behaviors that we have the power over to change some behaviors that we have that will help promote better brain health, but also possibly prevent Alzheimer's. The Lancet Commission, which is a research group of researchers worldwide, came together, really examined this over the last decade and said there's about 14 things we can do. I'm going to talk about 7 as they relate to my Me Time Monday, the weekly wellness plan to find balance and joy for a busy life. I'm going to take the 7 elements of wellness from my book, and I'm going to map the things that you can do, to promote better brain health onto, that 7 wellness wheel that we have. And so you can see some of the things that we have the power over. But I wanted to share with you because the Alzheimer's Association every year holds an international conference. I think last year it was in Barcelona. This year it happened to be in Philadelphia. And so I wanted to share with you some of the research that came out of the conference. I think it's important. I think it's also really interesting because, again, it gets us thinking about what are our risk factors that aren't genetic, that aren't tied to other things, but, that maybe we can help, promote prevention. So here's some of the top research that came out. So first of all, wildfire smoke. Now, I live in California, so this one really, I clued in on this really quickly because we have so many wildfires, as you know. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I think they're still burning in San Bernardino and other places, but, wildfires are kind of a constant here in Southern California. And even though I live in a place near the coast, which doesn't get as many of the brush that we can get in the central part of the state or the northern parts of the state, we still can get the smoke and kind of the toxins and the pollution that comes from these wildfires because they really engulf thousands and thousands of acres throughout California. So here was what the recent research found at the conference, that breathing in wildfire smoke definitely impacts brain performance, but ultimately could also be a risk factor for Alzheimer's and dementia. And, last episode, and I'm going to put it on this episode guide link again, I had an article that I wrote about the first responders from 9/11 who were down at ground zero, breathing in the toxins. These mostly men are in their 50s and 60s, and their brains are similar to someone in their 80s or 90s who has Alzheimer's disease, and they basically do have dementia, but at a much, much earlier age, and it's directly caused and tied to the environment that they were in, breathing in those toxins. So here's what this wildfire research found. 1.2 million Californians, they studied them for over 10 years, and they found that the wildfire smoke does do damage to the brain, even more so than vehicle pollution or factory pollution. So, we have a lot of cars and a lot of traffic in California. Wildfire smoke is even more detrimental to our brains. And the concern is that wildfires now account for 70% of the total fine particulate matter exposure on poor air quality days in California. So this is something that is anyone who lives in an environment where you have wildfires like California, we just need to pay attention to that. Be careful, when you're going outside and you're doing things outside, which we promote. We want everybody to go outside and be in nature. Just be careful on those days when maybe you're breathing in some of that wildfire smoke. Now, the other research that I thought was really interesting is the blood biomarkers. Now, we used to say that one of the only ways that we could really tell that you have Alzheimer's disease while you're still alive. It used to be that we could only say you had it after you died and maybe there was an autopsy that was done on your brain. Then we moved to PET scans, which are different from MRIs, right? And different from, other kinds of scans that you can do. PET scans were really the differentiator in being able to say, yeah, the brain is looking like it definitely has dementia and Alzheimer's. Now we've got blood biomarkers. Very interesting, right? So you could take a blood test, and what the research is showing is that they're about 90% accurate. So that's a pretty good accuracy rate. It's not 100% yet, but they're still perfecting it. These are already rolling out in certain areas, but it's something just to think about. If you do have a loved one that you're concerned of, or if you're concerned for yourself, now you may be able to ask your doctor for a blood test that would help determine whether or not it looks like maybe you do have Alzheimer's. And then if certainly you want to take more tests and talk to a neurologist and all that. Here, the other research, which was interesting, and this goes back to processed meat, can increase your Alzheimer's risk. In fact, this study found that 2 servings a week of processed red meat would give you a 14% higher risk of developing dementia than those people who eat less than 3 servings of processed red meat a month. Now, what is processed red meat? Well, it's things like ham, sausage, hot dogs, pepperoni, beef jerky, deli meats, and even in some instances, like the deli meats, like roast beef and turkey. So it's anything that gets kind of put together, that isn't organic, that isn't like the original source or whatever. You just want to be a little bit careful. I mean, I certainly don't necessarily say you have to get rid of all meat, but just be careful about these processed red meats. And again, I know, like my family, we love hot dogs. It's a staple during our Memorial Day and July 4th celebrations, but that's 2 times a year. So I think we're okay. We don't eat them other than those celebrations. I think we're okay. And then lastly, I thought this would be interesting for you. Ozempic, which we've heard so much about, right? So this is a drug that has gotten a lot of attention because it's being used to help with diabetes, control, but it's also now being used as a weight management tool, and Zepbound and some of these others. So they've been shown to help with weight loss, but now some of these drugs are even showing that maybe there might be a reduced risk of heart disease, and possibly then even a reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease, because Alzheimer's disease and heart disease often have very similar pathologies: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, high body mass index. All of those things are risk factors for developing both heart disease, but also Alzheimer's disease. So, but what this research showed is that this category of drugs can maybe reduce the brain shrinkage. So, of course, with Alzheimer's, what happens is the neurons in the brain are actually dying and they are disappearing. It's what we call atrophy. So that is really what's happening in someone's brain who has Alzheimer's or dementia. What these drugs could do is reduce that brain shrinkage, that neuron atrophy, in certain parts of the brain that are controlling memory, learning, language, and decision making by 50%. Pretty interesting. Now, of course, with all this research, we can't say definitively that absolutely if you do this, you won't get it, or if you do this, whatever. But I just feel like it's important to know the latest research, because it's things that we can think about now. And maybe we say, you know what? Okay, I do need to manage my diabetes, and the added benefit is I'm going to reduce my Alzheimer's risk. Now, I also, because it's World Alzheimer's Month, I want to do a shout out to some of our previous guests and episodes. All's Authors, great community, by the way, all kinds of great stories about Alzheimer's and books, and they interviewed me, and I was so grateful for that when my book, Me Time Monday, came out. Marianne Shuko is the founder of All's Authors. We're going to have the link on the episode guide page, so you can check that out. There's a community too, where you can go join book clubs and talk to people. And it's more than just books. It's also TV and film, which we're going to talk about in a minute, in pop culture. And then also our other episode I want to do a shout out to is the one we recently did. Oh, by the way, the Marianne Shuko, All's Authors, was season 3, episode 31. So you can look that up on our podcast page on the website or on Spotify or wherever you listen to our podcast. And the second one is Debbie Levy, who's the executive director of the Alzheimer's Association here in Orange County in California, and also Dr. Charles Wilcox, who's on the board. They were season 4, episode 41, so just very recently, and really great information about how the Alzheimer's Association can really help. And also great info from Dr. Wilcox on, again, some of these blood biomarkers and the drugs that work and don't work and when you need to think about it. What's the difference between dementia, Alzheimer's, and mild cognitive impairment? That's all in that particular episode, so you can check that out. Now, turning, as I said, to pop culture, we used to do this episode or do pop culture every episode. Then we kind of got away from it, and it's a fun segment. So I wanted to bring it back. Last episode we did the Thelma movie review, which if you haven't seen it, it's very poignant. It's hysterical. It's also very sensitive, and it gives dignity to aging, but it also talks about the vulnerabilities of age, and it does it from the perspective of the whole family. So very interesting, and it's all about grandparent scams, by the way, which is something we want to prevent with our loved ones. So on this episode, I'm going to talk just quickly about the movie that just came out called Reagan. It stars Dennis Quaid as President Ronald Reagan, Penelope Ann Miller as Nancy Reagan, and John Voight, who plays kind of a fictional character that was a KGB spy that followed Reagan throughout his career. And when, we were horns locked with Russia over the Cold War, and that's really the legacy, if you will, of President Reagan, was that famous speech that he made, which is in the movie, where he was at the Berlin Wall and he told Soviet President Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Very emotional for me because I kind of came of age during the Reagan years. I was, in college during his 8 years of his presidency. And certainly I didn't spend 8 years in college, right as I started my career. And this was back in the 80s, so it was 40 years ago. But more importantly for this episode, I just want to do a shout out. By the way, it's a great movie. I really enjoyed it. Dennis Quaid, phenomenal acting. He really got the Reagan voice and mannerism down, which, is not always easy to do, but it was really great acting. And so I really recommend it. But I wanted to also bring it up because at the very end of the movie, they touch upon, just for a few minutes, because it's throughout Reagan's life. So it's, couldn't spend all the time on this. But it was about how President Reagan was really the first worldwide figure to announce he had Alzheimer's disease. And he wrote that phenomenal letter, which makes me tear up. But, in telling the world, telling people that he had this disease and how hard he knew it would be on his family, particularly on Nancy as his family caregiver. And of course, as we know, she went on to become a great advocate for family caregivers, but also for stem cell research. She was very big on that because she really, was looking for how do we find a way to not have other families go through this disease. So it's a great movie, really interesting. I'm going to also share some links that I've written about Nancy Reagan and her legacy for family caregivers. I wrote those for PBS Next Avenue and some others, and so we'll have those links and everything up on our episode guide page. Now, turning to National Falls Prevention Awareness Week, which is September 23rd through 28th. The first day of fall is September 22nd. So the very next day, we go into Falls Prevention Week, which is a little different than falls. It's kind of clever. The National Council on Aging, NCOA, is kind of a big organization that does a lot around this. And they actually have workshops that are going to be going on all week in senior centers, 11,000 senior centers across the country. You can do a falls-free checkup, which is kind of a questionnaire that you or your loved one can take, and they've got some other sessions and things going on. But just to give you, some insights, first of all, according to the CDC, more than 1 in 4 adults over age 65 will fall, which is actually resulting in about 3 million ER visits every year. Now, we also know that after an initial fall, after that first fall, a lot of older adults have the risk of falling again within 3 years. It's very hard to recover, particularly if you've broken a bone or broken a hip. Very, very hard to recover from a fall. So we really want to do the things we need to do to prevent falls, particularly in the home, as much as we can. Also, just the fear of falling then makes a lot of older adults not want to get out and enjoy the social activities or the physical activities like walking that they used to because they have a fear of falling again. So we're going to hear from Steve, because Steve's got a great technology solution for how to help us overcome that fear of falling again and get our loved ones back out there doing what they love to do. Also, just be aware that 72% of the falls among older adults are not reported to their family caregiver, to their adult children, or to their medical provider. And so sometimes they're trying to heal on their own, or again, they're just not mentioning that they've had a fall, because I think that makes, I think that the psychology is, I'm vulnerable. I don't want to admit that. I don't want people to know that. But I don't want people to fuss over me now. I get it. That's a little bit too what the movie Thelma is all about. So again, let's look at these age tech solutions like the products that are coming from Theora Care that can help us as family caregivers. And then I want to just mention something quickly, because it happened to my family personally, but most of us are aware that of the blind bumps is what we call them. It's the little bumps when you come out of the grocery store, or you come out of the restaurant, or at crosswalks. They're the little bumps that are put on the streets. It's part of the American Disabilities Act from 1990. By 2010, all of these areas had to have it. It's a federal law, and it's for blind people. It's to make them aware that, hey, there's a street or there's traffic, be aware, and they can feel that with their feet, or if they're using a cane. Well, unfortunately, while we're helping the blind, we're now hurting older adults. And I say that because there have now been so many incidents of people, particularly as we get older, maybe we aren't stepping quite as well, or our balance is a little bit off, or whatever it happens to be. But really, anybody of any age, this can happen to, particularly if it's raining or it's slick and dewy out and you slip on those bumps. But we've now seen tons and tons of older adults fall because of these bumps. So it's becoming a real issue. Now, I'm hopeful that all the great minds out there, the innovators and others, can come up with something that helps both the blind population, but also our older population, because we cannot afford to have our older adults falling. And I say that because my mom actually fell. Now, she was in, and is in great physical shape, doesn't use a walker or cane or anything like that, picks her feet up, we walk every week. But, we had sat down to a dinner. We were at a restaurant celebrating. We came out. She didn't really notice the bumps, hit it at the wrong angle and went down. Split her lip, blood everywhere, almost cracked a tooth. I mean, it was awful. And of course, my brother and I are in a panic and get her to the emergency room and all that. But the bottom line is, we have to pay attention to the fact that our older loved ones, again, there's vulnerabilities with aging, and we just need to be mindful of that. So steering your loved one around those bumps. It's also really hard, by the way, for people who have wheelchairs. And I know I have friends who use walkers or canes. It's really tough. I mean, you cannot walk over these things. You've got to go around them. So as a family caregiver, as a younger person, put your radar on to not have your loved ones, have to interact with these bumps. And oh, by the way, just FYI, there is a gentleman in Northern California who slipped, broke his tibia on these things, filed a lawsuit, actually won the lawsuit, which I thought was really interesting. And, the question is, we don't want to create more disability, which is what happens when people fall. So we've got to come up with a better solution. But just a little caution and things to be aware of when you're entering public places. Now, with that, talking about falls, Steve Popovich, who's the founder and CEO of Theora Care. And by the way, I've been doing some consulting for this startup company because I believe in them so much. They are really wonderful. They're smart in the way that they're looking at their products. They're really mindful about making sure that these products work for older adults. It's not just a great idea. It's also another great tech idea, which we see all the time. They actually think about the population of both the older adult and the family caregivers, by the way, because they talk about this being a caregiver solution, meaning us as family members. So Steve's going to tell us all about some new news that they have around not only detecting, but maybe preventing falls. And also this great news story, so heartwarming because it includes dogs, but it's a story about a gentleman with Alzheimer's and how Theora Care was one of the three heroes in recovering this gentleman who wandered off in Detroit. So here's my interview with Steve Popovich. So I am really thrilled to have my guest on this episode because I've actually been doing some work with him and his company, Theora Care, and that is Steve Popovich, who is the founder and CEO of Theora Care. So, Steve, welcome to Caregiving Club On Air.
Thank you, Sherri. Thanks for the invite to be here.
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned, the first question we always ask all of our guests is, where are we talking to you from today?
I am in Austin, Texas, or outside of Austin, Texas. So
The great state of Texas.
yeah, so I'm nearby where Willie Nelson lives.
There you go. There you go. Well, as you know, I live in California and a lot of my friends have moved to Texas. So
Yeah, we
you're
got a
getting
lot
all,
of Californians here.
I was going to say, all the crazy Californians are moving to Texas. Anyway, I want to just thank you so much for being on the show today because you've actually got some really interesting news we're going to talk about. But what I want to start with is just give us, an overview of what Theora Care is, because I know when we go to your website, you talk about you are a company that really produces and creates caregiving solutions. So what is Theora Care?
So what we are is essentially a virtual partner for family caregivers. We have some professional caregivers as well. We have a lot of customers that will have caregiver teams. In the caregiver world, which my wife and I became caregivers about 9 years ago for my in-laws. My father-in-law had Alzheimer's. That's how we did a lot of focus initially with Alzheimer's. My mother-in-law, he passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, fantastic guy. My mother-in-law is on hospice right now for the last 2+ years. But it varies all over the map as far as the level of care, in the situations. And then you got, people that are very proactive, they'll start, doing caregiving type functions early, whereas in some cases you wait for a catastrophe before caregiving kind of begins. They look for products like ours.
Right.
So, it's usually it's not a situation where the caregivers are hovering over the loved one, 7 days, 20 hours, 24 hours a day, which is impossible because caregivers also have lives, and our lives change, and we're blessed to be able to care for our in-laws, for example, last few years. But what we're doing is we're giving tools to those family members to be able to kind of have their life, a little bit of their life left, as well as being able to effectively care for the loved one, in any situation. So, Alzheimer's is probably going to be our focus today, but we do a lot of other kinds of long-term illnesses too, Parkinson's, autism, and things like that.
Well, I think I love the
So,
fact that you call yourself a virtual partner to caregivers. So, very often we see companies that market themselves as we're going to replace you as the caregiver. And I think that's not the right, that's not what caregivers want. Why we still want to be there to take care of our loved one, but we need a little bit of help. And certainly we need break to participate in our own lives. So what's interesting and that I love is that you have based a lot of the products, in fact most of the products, around what you call situational awareness technology. Tell us what that is.
yeah, so situational awareness is a term that's used a lot in other markets, like the military, for example, use it. But what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to understand not, clinically what's going on with the person that you're caring for, as much understanding kind of what's happening with the rhythms of their day. We have a platform called Theora Rhythms, which is part of our backend platform that understands kind of what's happening in the environment, even though you're not there. So you kind of like being there without being there, kind of a thing. And that's, our caregivers aren't always even local to the person that that they're at least participating with, maybe as a team, a family team of people involved with using our technologies. So understanding, everything from, what time did mom get up? What time did she go to bed? What time, how many steps did she take today? Understanding kind of, is that normal or is that unusual? So we adopted that approach first with fall detection. We call it smart fall detection. And we employed a technology, it's AI based, which is a loosely used term these days, with what's called neural network technology, which allows you to take data and to teach a system to be able to understand kind of what's normal and what's not is one of the things, and also understand uh, more accurately falls. With geriatrics, the challenge you also have is you have hard falls and soft falls. So our long-term goals are to be able to even understand how to predict when somebody's at a higher fall risk. And we've collected over 1 million data records, from our users to date to be able to analyze that data. We're employing people in the data science communities to be able for us to be able to properly interpret some of that data.
And I think that's so exciting. I know that you have recently announced your smart fall detection, which is perfect for this episode because we're right in the month of National Falls, Prevention and Awareness Week, which comes up on September 23rd. But what I think is great is that you're supplying the technology that lets people, older adults in particular, obviously, still live independent lives, gives the caregivers more data so that they feel like they can maybe intervene or be better caregivers. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of the feedback that you get from your customers on how well this technology and your products are helping them.
Yeah, so by employing this platform, this AI neural network type platform, one of the things that with smart fall detection, for example, people, that's a term that's used in a lot of different products, but when you have fall detection, one of the issues you've got is to be able to understand also false alarms or minimize the false alarm. So a lot of products that are on the market today, even from very large companies, are acclimated toward millennials. So you're riding a mountain bike and you fall. That's a catastrophic event. You have an auto accident, and the impact of that accident, even at a low speed, is really significant from a sensor perspective. What we've done is we're taking that to a much higher level that's focused into the geriatric space. But the false alarms, of course, for people that might be caregivers are just going to kind of well, it's they're not going to be able to believe, for example, that there's a problem with their loved one. They'll lose confidence in the technology. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of went overboard. We actually delayed launching smart fall detection until we thought we had a product that was head and shoulders above the present market. And I think we do today, and it's getting better all the time.
And I think that's really important for our listeners to understand because I know that, some of their maybe older parents, those of you out there who are caregiving for older parents, they may have an iWatch or whatever, but and you might be able to find an app about fall detection, but you've really kind of also taking it to the next level because I read that your false positive readings, you have a 90% accuracy rate. So I remember when the Fitbits first came out, and if you wave your hand or clap your hands, it would count as a step. And it's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, if your parent
Yes.
is wearing the Theora smart wearable, smart watch, they may not have fallen, and you want that kind of precision in the data. So tell us, and that's really your neural networking technology, correct? Or what
Right. Yeah.
provides that?
Yeah, one of the big differences there is that we're watching before, during, and after fall or suspected fall. So, for example, before the fall, the sensors are operating all the time while you're wearing the device, the watch. And if there's we call them anomalies. If there's an anomaly that occurs, because there's certain a level of intelligence inside the wearable itself, is that since we're basically like a very small cellular, smartphone, is we have that cool connection back to the cloud, to the cell network, where we can process data. So if we think that there is a situation with these anomalies, that connection's made, into the cloud through the cell network. The back end, our back end, has a bunch of heavy processing that can look at data in real time and understand, for example, how to kind of hash out, is it a fall, is it not a fall? So, and then look at what's happened after the suspected fall. Because, for example, in a case with somebody walking down a hallway and they bump their wrist, that the wrist that may have the watch on it against around a door jamb, that would be a catastrophic impact and an alarm on most products that are out there, because they're looking at that inertial impact primarily, and they're not looking at what happened before and what happened after. Since we're doing before and after as well, we can say, okay, there was a significant impact, but Steve was continuing to walk down that hallway like he was before this, the impact was recorded, and that makes all the difference in the world as far as the false positives and the false negatives, for fall detection. That's why we
Yeah,
even name it smart fall detection rather than just fall detection.
right.
It is
Well,
different.
and for our listeners out there, we know that 1 in 4 adults over 65 will have a fall, typically at home. We also know that once you've had that first fall, you're at higher risk now for a second fall within the next 3 years. And so often a lot of the older adults, then they pull back from being socially engaged or still going out and doing their walk, maybe in the woods or riding their bike or
Right.
whatever. And what you're giving both the older adult and the caregiver is more of that confidence and that data that, hey, you can still do things, and we're going to help predict, what's going on here, right?
Right. Well, since we're collecting data, that's a really good point. Is that we can see, and you're right, falls, basically have a pattern too. So if you look at it from a faraway view, and you're collecting information over, let's say, several months, is that you can see a loved one where they're going to become, more prone to fall just because of the stats of those kinds of things. And in our case, what we're also trying to do, rather than just detect it, is to be able to give information to a caregiver that they might be able to be proactive. Maybe physical therapy, like with my father-in-law's situation, he had a bad knee. So physical therapy was part of the process for him to be able to enjoy, higher quality of life longer, because of the effectiveness of the therapy. We could see changes, for example, in his walking gait, when he did more therapy and less therapy.
Right.
So there are some things that these tools can provide information for caregivers to help keep their loved ones maybe semi independent longer, and safer.
So I just want so our audience kind of can picture this. Obviously, we're talking about smartwatch, a smart wearable, which is very fashionable looking. And I know you've got great designs and faces that can be changed out and all that, but it's also very much designed for an older adult with, there's a simplicity to it. But also tell us, okay, so what's the connection then to the family caregiver? Tell us about the other pieces of it, the app and also the automatic kind of connection and communication.
Yeah, so we have an application called Theora Pro, and that's the caregivers can have. You can have as many copies as you want, basically paired up with the wearable device that your loved one has on. And there's information they call them notifications, that appear on the user's phone, without running the app. They don't have to have the app turned on. So, for example, if my mom drops her Theora Connect watch on a charge cradle, is I'm going to get an immediate notification. My brother and I'll get an immediate notification that's happening. If she were to fall, for example, we get a notification. If she presses the SOS button, she gets, we might get a call, for example. Well, that call might also go to somebody else, but we get a notification that the call occurred as well. And then battery information, understanding kind of the health of the device, because part of the hidden stuff that we're doing in the background is, that device is, for a Theora Connect product, is typically checking in every few minutes to make sure everything is working properly. And then the app also allows the caregiver, because part of it, part of our application, it also has what we call safe zones. So if like for my mom's situation, If she leaves her house, I get a notification that she's left her house. I can also set up a safe zone, for example, at the pharmacy area in town, which is about, roughly 10 minutes away by car. And I can get a notification that says mom arrived at the pharmacy. So, and then I get another notification that says mom has arrived back home. Now, with our product, you could also, as a caregiver, you could also say, I don't want all that noise. I just want to know, this or that or whatever. So I can filter out some of that information. But for my personal, journey, with being a caregiver, also for my mom, who's in a different state up in the mountains, all that little tidbits of information give me confidence that everything's normal, everything's okay. If I think
Yeah.
something there's an issue, I can press the quick connect feature on our smartphone application, and I instantly get two-way voice communication with my mom. So, a few weeks ago, her battery died, for example. She pressed the SOS button and called me immediately. We talked, everything's good. The weather was good. She was at a gas station, for example. So somebody was trying to help her. We organized a call to the AAA. They were there in a few minutes. And, it's one of those things where as a caregiver, even though I'm way remote, 1,000+ miles away, is that I get a lot of peace of mind with that, which is a great value. But my mom also doesn't want to leave where she lives. She's got a fantastic, high quality life, and she got her cats and dogs there up in the mountains. Anyway, life's good for her. So my brother and I could just kind of keep tabs on her, in a real time basis.
Well, I think that's the goal, right? I mean, we know our loved ones
Yes,
want to stay in their homes as long as possible. They want to stay independent.
right.
They don't want like remote monitor cameras looking at them, all day
Yeah,
long. So this is kind of a bridge to, okay, I can know that mom's okay because she lives alone. And she can still do all the things she wants to do, but she also knows I'm here and I'll know if there's an issue. I want to take us now to, you had some really fantastic news recently, and I know you've done some work and really collaborated with a lot of law enforcement agencies, but there was a Detroit news story that just happened, and a lot of our listeners are caring for loved ones who have Alzheimer's or dementia, and we want to keep our loved ones at home as long as possible, but we know that there's a wandering issue with about 6 out of 10 of those adults who have Alzheimer's. And Theora Care became part of the hero of this story. So tell us what happened in Detroit.
yeah. So what happened in Detroit is, a couple again living, on their own. They purchased one of our wearable products a while ago, and the husband is the one that had the Alzheimer's, and he's, Alzheimer's, is a long journey in most cases. Pretty good health, but wandered. Like you said a minute ago, 60% of people with Alzheimer's will wander at one time or another, and it's really terrifying, especially in this case where it was very early in the morning, and he got up quietly without waking up his wife, and just left the house. And he wandered quite a ways, several miles away from his house. When the wife woke up again early in the morning, she realized that he was gone. Checked her app, found out where he was, notified law enforcement, and they had some bloodhound dogs that were really helpful, because the area where the person was found was basically open field space with grass or some kind of grass that was roughly about as tall as he was. So he was just in this jungle of grass, and the watch we were able to get the area of the town where he was, because he could have gone any direction, of course, right? And we were able to allow law enforcement to kind of narrow this down to roughly an acre or two of grasslands. And the news report, I think it was on NBC, that we have a link on our website that kind of shows what the environment looked like. It was one of those kinds of things where if he was quiet, for example, if he was a foot away from you, a couple of feet away from you, you might have missed him completely if you were searching for him without the dogs.
Right.
So it was a pretty incredible story, and the wife, was very appreciative, and notified us about what happened. But we have, and we have law enforcement agencies, because of the challenge of finding people with Alzheimer's. instead of, being many hours, and I think the average cost was quantified by one of the big organizations we're involved with, Project Lifesaver, which works with law enforcement agencies across the country for Alzheimer's specifically. Find searching, and these costs I think average about $16,000 to $17,000 per situation, per agency. So, the law enforcement officers have a lot to do and a lot on their plate. So with our products, we have hundreds of users across the country that basically have kind of alleviated all the stress of somebody being missing, because they, in a lot of cases, the loved one, the person that's a caregiver, is the one that actually just goes and finds the person that's lost, and then they take them home. So it's not a crisis type of situation in those cases. They usually find them within minutes, and rather than hours, that kind of stuff. So it is really it's a big impact
Yeah.
as far as
Well, and to
the
that,
concern.
again, just to emphasize to our listeners out there, particularly if you have a loved one with Alzheimer's dementia, this is one of your biggest concerns. And as you said, I think they found this gentleman within 90 minutes
Right,
because they knew where to look, because the wife
right,
had the app. She was able to pinpoint him through the GPS pretty accurately. I know those GPS technology can get, sometimes within a few feet or yards. And then, as you said, then the canines came in and they could
right.
really track him. So it was a great collaboration, but it's another reminder to us that we do have to look at these tools and these services if we do want to keep our loved ones at home and protect them as much as possible. Which I think is, and it was a great story. I just thought that was like so uplifting. One question I have is, a lot of our listeners may know that sometimes an adult who has Alzheimer's, if they even have their own watch, or this new watch now, this Theora Connect watch that they would have to wear so that we could track them, they like to take them off. So what is the solution for caregivers who have a loved one who may like to take things off and then it wouldn't be useful? What do you do for that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big issue. So what we did in the early days, we designed a proprietary locking clasp. So it requires a key, that we provide to the customers, the caregivers, and they can unlock it, and lock it, once they put it on the other loved ones. So they don't have to worry about that situation of being removed, because most cases is that the caregivers aren't in front of their loved ones throughout the day. So the idea
Right.
there is that, okay, I've got peace of mind as the caregiver because I know it has a locking clasp. If I want to take a look at my notifications, for example, I could press a button, I can figure out mom's at home, kind of a thing. So again, that's really for me as the caregiver in a lot of cases, right?
Right.
Uh, but it really kind of changes my stress level, as far as understanding
Yeah.
what's going on, and knowing that also the technology is working. Like I said, we have this heartbeat process that works in the background, so that we are really an enterprise type of a solution that's being offered for this really important, personal application.
Sure. Well, and again, in this situation, the wife was asleep. She had no idea that
Right.
he had just gotten up and left the house, and that's very typical. We hear those stories,
Right.
and in the past,
Yes.
they often had tragic endings because we didn't, as you said,
Yes.
we don't know where to look. The police, they have nowhere, to guide them, and it could take hours, days, and then unfortunately,
Right.
we can have a tragic ending. Let me circle back to, you mentioned your mom. I know that you're a long distance caregiver for your mom. You mentioned
Right.
that. And I'm just curious because you use advanced technology. You've kind of helped us understand the neural networking that you use, which I know is advanced and that's proprietary to you and Theora Care. You also use artificial intelligence, and people hear that word AI now and they think, "Ooh, I'm not so sure about that." I mean,
Yeah.
the tech industry loves it, and everybody has to have it these days, it seems, but the consumers are still like, wait a minute, what's going to happen to my privacy and all that. How did you overcome that, both with your mom personally, but also what do you do to help customers understand that their privacy isn't going to be invaded with this technology?
Yeah, that's a really good question these days because AI is everywhere. I think every day now there's AI is mentioned a dozen or more times, at least in my life, for other things besides what we're doing. And the other challenge, of course, is where is that data? Who owns the data, and where is that data being, used? And in the consumer world, like a search, you use a search engine or something like that for some kind of product. All of a sudden, you get pop-ups for all that kind of, those kinds of products, or products that are synergistic to that search thing. We're not selling that information. The information we're collecting is really just for our own internal use, for to make our systems smarter. So if we're using that neural network to train the systems to be able to add more value to the end user. So one is security, because you also hear about these data breaches and things like that. So we are, best practices, security. Again, it's an enterprise type of a mentality here, for all that kind of information. So protecting the information, and then again, we're not monetizing that information. So you're not going to see, for example, mailers that are going to go out or whatever with other products for geriatric care or something like that. It's all locked up.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really important for people to understand. And as you said, the AI in this case is helping to also personalize the data that each of the families and the family caregiver get, so that you know specifically about your loved one and what their patterns are, right? So again, it
Right.
kind of makes us better caregivers in a way. We can use these tools to supplement what we do rather than replace
Right.
us.
Well, and basically everybody is or will become a caregiver as time goes on. I mean, the cool thing is we're living longer. The challenge, of course, is as we're living longer, is that some of these long-term diseases, it can take many years. I mean, my wife and I, started becoming a caregiver for my in-laws years ago. Now my mother-in-law, or my mother rather, that's in the mountains of California, she's 88 years old. She still drives and everything. And my brother and I are trying to keep her quality of life high, what really wants to do, as long as possible. So, knock on wood. With tools like this, we understand where we might become more concerned, or see that, using the data to be able to understand where that curve is, where, we need to get a little more help for mom, kind of thing. So that's what we've been doing for the last few years is, she needs more assistance with, her general housework, as far as people, keeping an eye on her as well, neighbors understanding kind of, what's happening. But one of the most challenging things, of course, is with the elderly, is when they can't drive anymore, things that go safely, things like that. So
Right.
understanding if my mom, for example, she has doctors that she uses. She was in the medical field for her whole life, and so she leverages a lot of the skills that different areas for long-term health. And for me to understand, these long trips you might take to a doctor, which is about roughly an hour down the mountain, that's a pretty treacherous trip. Now, fortunately, cell phone coverage now is, all these highways, you don't see call boxes anymore and things like that, because the cell phone carriers are covering all that space really well. So
Right.
we can understand a lot of different scenarios that might come up. And in a mountain area, of course, you also have just the weather. So the weather could become a very significant factor for young and old people. But for somebody who's 88, a bigger deal. So understanding what the weather is where she is becomes one of those other data points for us to be able to be better caregivers.
Yep. Well, and all of that information is important, as you said. I mean, we want to also be able to live our lives, but we want that peace of mind and all that.
Right,
We're
right.
getting close on time, Steve, but I just wanted to touch two other points quickly. So, first of all, just so our listeners understand, if you're really interested in what Steve's been talking about, the Theora Connect is your smart wearable that you purchase, and then there's a subscription service, correct? And you use cell
Right.
service, is that correct? Cellular service for
Yes.
the what? Okay.
Yep. Everything is cellular, so there's virtually no installation, issue. It's just take it out of the box, turn it on, and charge it up, and you're good to go. We also have all of our customer support team. If you have any questions about the features before or after purchasing a product, from us, all of our tech support guys are or have been caregivers, and a lot of them involving Alzheimer's, which is really tragic. So,
Right.
but you can
So tell me,
find more info.
Oh,
information
go
on
ahead.
theoracare.com,
Oh,
for our
good. And
products.
we're going to have that link. I know you've got a YouTube channel. You mentioned the Detroit News. We're going to make sure we feature that on our episode guide page. So we'll have
Right.
all of those great links to theoracare.com. And now, and just real quickly, two things. You recently were authorized by Apple on some critical alerts. Tell us really quickly what that is. What does that mean, and how does that benefit me if I'm a family caregiver?
Yeah. So the big deal here is, and this is a big deal, especially for Apple's smartphone users as caregivers. In the situation like the video you were talking about, the NBC video news story, that lady who was sleeping, with her husband at home, and she gets up, let's say at 2 o'clock in the morning when most of us are, pretty deep REM state of sleep, is that it will override the slide switch you have, or what I have on my iPhone. There's different versions, of course, so that your the alarms that come from us will be audible, whereas everything else won't be, which is really a cool feature. And one of our engineers actually had emailed the CEO of Apple to kind of get the wheels going on this. And we're really, we feel really blessed that we were able to get their support and to integrate that into our latest firmware release.
Yeah, which is really cool. And a lot of people may not understand that, but once you get into this, you realize how beneficial that kind of override is.
Right.
And then I know we've been focused on Theora Connect, which is your smart wearable, your smartwatch, but you also have other services and products as well. And I know you've got new announcement that you can't tell us about yet, but Steve and his team are not, they're not just sitting back on their laurels out there, folks. They're developing a lot of stuff, but you've also got in-home kind of sensors and monitoring. Do you want to just touch on that really quickly?
Well, we're involved with the NIH on fall detection technology. We're working with some major universities, the population health. Here in Texas A&M is one of them. But what we've done is we're becoming kind of that the go-to place for technology for fall detection. So whether you've got, for example, a device on your wrist, whether you're mobile or you're more in a closed environment kind of a thing, is that we have solutions and technology to kind of cover all different aspects of this. But and our goal is of course is perfection. Our accuracy rates on false positives, false negatives are really kind of second to none. But but there are other things we're building here. I look at this kind of like bridge building. So, for example, on things like sleep, how's my mom sleeping? Things like, these are all for almost anybody who's non-technical or technical, as a caregiver, understanding, some of those things make a big difference in how we could be effective as a caregiver. So bathroom habits, things of that. Again, there's no cameras involved with this, so there's, as far as the challenges on privacy, I mean, there's always that question that comes up, but understanding some of these changes in habits could make a big difference, as far as how to effectively care for somebody. So
Yeah. And as we said, I mean, even if your loved one doesn't have dementia and Alzheimer's, there's such a built-in benefit because of the wandering we just talked about. But even if your loved one is just, getting older and they're living alone, we have a lot of solo agers out there.
right.
And if you do have a fall, as I said, a lot of older adults pull back from doing the things they love. Well, this is going to give you that confidence to keep going. And I also want to mention, because I know you also do some work with senior living, just because your loved one goes into assisted living or memory care doesn't mean that they're also being watched 24/7. So this could also be a supplement to make sure you as a family member kind of knows what's going on with them, even if they're under the care in a community, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Years ago, my grandmother lived to be over 100, and unfortunately, I had to get her into an assisted living facility. It's probably 20 years ago now, but I wish we had some of this technology for just caring for her, because some of the challenges was, well, just just from a social perspective. All of a sudden, grandma is, she was kind of, she was very challenged because her whole life was about cooking. So they took away her ability to be able to have her own kitchen, in her apartment kind of a thing. But understanding, for example, it again changes, for example, in her patterns, because there were patterns, and this is with a lot of people or most people, is that you'll see things fall off. But I'll tell you one thing that would always bug the heck out of me, that's really easy to solve with a wearable, and that was just being able to get a hold of it, at a moment's notice. So, hey, I just want to talk to grandma, hear her voice, make sure everything's okay, that kind of stuff. Because, those days, well, I had a cell phone, but she did. Giving her one would be, useless because she wouldn't know how to use it or things like that. But to be
Right.
able to have a wearable where she doesn't have to touch anything and I could talk to her, so
Right.
like the old-fashioned Dick Tracy watch kind of a scenario, and I can just say, hear her voice, and be, and just, be able to have a quick chat with her,
Yeah.
those
That
kinds of
just
things. That,
makes
that makes a huge difference. And when you go into these assisted living facilities, especially if the person is, and there's a lot of different situations, whether it's Parkinson's or it's, Alzheimer's or other kinds of agitations, PTSD, things like that, is they might be outside their apartment, for example, uh, and nobody knows where they are. So
right.
for assisted living, I could give you a dashboard and show, for example, all the facility, people that are on staff. Where is Steve? What's he been doing today? Kind of a thing, or because in those worlds, most of the time, the only checkpoint is, oh, Steve didn't show up for dinner. Let's go find Steve.
Right.
Right.
Right. So now you've got the family caregiver and the professional caregivers who can kind of have more of that
Yes.
information. Well, Steve,
Right.
we've run out of time, but it's just been fantastic talking to you. I think our listeners have learned a lot. And again, theoracare.com is where we want to send them to get more information. Anything else you want to share or tell us?
No, just appreciate the time.
Okay. Well, again, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much, Steve.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
So that was a great interview with Steve. Lots of just such good information. And again, if you have a loved one with dementia that you want to help stay at home as long as possible, think about Theora Care, because that smart wearable watch and some of the other tech solutions they have are just so great. And way beyond, and a lot of older adults like Apple Watch, these are just as stylish, just as smart, and way beyond the technology that Apple Watch apps provide. I know Apple Watch has a falls detection or app, but it's nowhere near as good as what Theora Care is doing. So, and I'm not just saying that because I'm consulting. I actually tested it out myself, and it's really great stuff. Now, moving into our well home design news, again, I'm going to go back to National Falls Awareness Prevention Awareness Month, September 23rd through 28th. Most of our falls at home occur in the bathroom. That's of any age. 80% of falls in the home are in the bathroom. So we all know about grab bars and all that stuff. We also know, or this is another statistic I found interesting, is that the calls into 911, 17% of them are from older adults who have fallen at home. That's almost 1 in 5. So again, this is a big issue. We want to stay focused on how do we prevent these. So I wanted to just bring a couple things up. I have been asked by Comfort Keepers to be a spokesperson for them. They asked me originally to be their spokesperson for their National Day of Joy. And as you know, we talked to Sadia Gajadar of Comfort Keepers for our season 4, this season, episode 41. We talked about the National Day of Joy with Sadia and what Comfort Keepers does. They're basically a home care agency nationwide. You can find them anywhere. And now they've asked me to come back, which I'm really excited about, and do some more spokesperson work, mostly TV and other interviews for them, and a little social media stuff. But I just recently did a few TV interviews, some in Chicago and other places. And I'm headed out next week for Florida to do the Balancing Act TV show with host Montel Williams for them. And they wanted me to talk about Alzheimer's, caregiving, and particularly safety in the home. So I wanted to share a couple things with you that I've been sharing on these TV interviews. I thought I'd give you that. And we'll have links to all of these things when they finally, appear. But first of all, from a safety perspective for someone with Alzheimer's disease, we know that lighting is really important for older adults overall. Our eyesight does get worse as we age. Actually, we need 3 times more light at age 60 than we did at age 20 to see things easily. So wherever you're doing tasks in the kitchen, the bathroom, or even reading in the bedroom or the living room or whatever, you need really good lighting. But the other added thing with a loved one with Alzheimer's is we know they get very restless, sometimes agitated, and they're very active at night. This is because their circadian rhythms are dysfunctioning, okay? They're more active at night and sleepier during the day. One of the ways we can combat that is to get our loved ones out into sunshine during the day, get them out on a walk, get that natural sunlight, that vitamin D into their system, because this helps with trying to modulate that circadian rhythm dysfunction that's happening, but also that activity will help make them a little, more fatigued, if you will, sleepier at night, and maybe they won't wander or be as restless at night. Now, if it's not great weather, because we're in the fall right now, we're headed into winter weather, you can think about a light therapy lamp. And I know I've talked about this before. We've got links, and we'll put another one on our episode guide page, but that's something to think about. So lighting is number 1. Number 2 is hazardous materials. Our Alzheimer's brains don't interpret the way a normal brain would. So if there's a really sharp kitchen knife, someone might pick that up if they have Alzheimer's and forget what the knife does and hurt themselves. Same thing with hazardous materials. Maybe you've got rat poison or, whatever it is, turpentine, something that is in the garage or in a place where, they're living at home as independently as possible. You've got to protect them because they don't remember that these things are poisonous, that these things are bad. So you just have to be really careful about what is laying out, what is still out that they can possibly get their hands on and possibly hurt themselves, right? And then lastly, of course, balance issues. We know that people with dementia and Alzheimer's have far more balance issues than just normal aging adults who have joint pain or arthritis or whatever. Balance is really an issue for Alzheimer's adults. So it becomes really important to not only have, we talked about, falls in the bedroom, those grab bars in the bathroom, or falls in the bathroom, those grab bars in the bathroom, but also maybe if you've got a long hallway they're trying to navigate, they're going to bump into the hall, they might fall. Maybe you think about putting like a handrail so they can kind of hang on a little bit to the side of the wall where they've got they can balance themselves and steady themselves. So these are just some ideas, but I'm going to give you another free webinar. I've mentioned this before. I'm going to give the link to you for my dementia friendly home design. And of course, I talk about the 5 C's, the curves, color, clutter-free, contrast, and comfort sources. And I'm not going to go through it now because you have to watch the webinar, but I'm going to have the link up for you guys. If you're interested in this, go check it out. It's something really important to make your home dementia friendly. I also want to do a shout out to Do Dementia age tech solutions and startup companies. I actually met them through when I was a mentor for the Techstars Pivotal Ventures incubator program, which is where startup companies go to get mentored and to, get their business plans, so they can go out there and get investment dollars. I met 2 really great companies and I thought they were worth mentioning on this episode. The first one, and they both, by the way, are TV related. So the first one is Zinnia TV. They have about 500 different videos on things like animals. I like the puppies video, or scenery like the mountains or lakes, or activities of daily living like brush your teeth. Anyway, these videos are very helpful for someone with dementia, and it reduces their stress. In fact, they did a study among their users, and they said 83% of family caregivers said that Zinnia not only entertains their loved one with dementia, but also reduces their agitation and reduces, their stress. And the family caregiver's stress is reduced, particularly if you sit down and watch the videos with your loved one. So that's one option. The other option is Memory Lane TV, and we're going to have links to both of these companies on our website. they're basically a multimedia, multisensory, immersive experience. And they do a lot, all their stuff is really based on evidence-based science that show that watching these short TV-based stories, but there's no plot. You don't have to follow a character and remember what's going on. There's no storyline. So it's not like watching regular TV, which can be frustrating for dementia adults because they forget maybe between commercials or 20 minutes into the show who people are and what just happened. So these are more just scenes and things that they can enjoy and not feel that frustration of losing the plot. And so it's really interesting. And I really was fascinated by how they've done this and the effects that they've shown through their research of how, again, reducing that agitation, reducing that stress and that frustration for a dementia adult. So 2 things to check out. They're subscription based, like most TV is these days, right? Like Netflix and everything else we watch, it seems. But you may want to check those out if you have a loved one with dementia, because they're great. And then I'm also going to do another free webinar for you because it's National Emergency Preparedness Month. I'm not going to take the time up on this podcast to talk about the things we should think about, but no matter where you live in the country, wildfires, floods, ice storms, hurricanes, tornadoes. What am I missing? I know I'm missing something. Earthquakes. I'm in California, so we always think about that. There's always going to be something. And so, again, we might have an emergency plan or not. If not, you should. But we need to talk with our families and we need to think about our older adults because, let's just say mom and dad don't drive anymore. And, you sold their car and now they take Uber or rideshare or get rides from friends. Well, guess what, folks? In an emergency, that's not going to happen. There's not going to be Uber in the middle of a hurricane, okay? So we really need to think these things through. We also need to think about not only if they're living in their own home, evacuation. A lot of older adults, they don't want to evacuate because they just don't want to leave their home they've been in for 40 or 50 years and all of those memories and things. I've got a lot of really great solutions in this webinar to get people over the hump of evacuation, but also things to think about in terms of keeping them safe. And even if they're in a senior living community, what's the backup plan if staff can't get there? A lot of people want to go to their own family, so they're really going to be worried about your loved one who's in the senior living community. These are all great things for us to be talking about, thinking about, and I don't want to scare anybody, so I use a Wizard of Oz theme to kind of, temper the, oh my gosh, this is like so depressing. It's not depressing. It's just, wow, it's a little startling when you start to think about these things. So we use our Wizard of Oz theme to get you kind of back in that good mood that, okay, let's be proactive and create a family plan. So I'm going to have that webinar link up on the episode guide page. I'm also going to have an article I wrote on falls and fires because that's what's happening in September. And then a shout out to another podcast we did with Ken Deering, who is the co-founder of iGuard Stove, which is another great solution for preventing fires in the home. He was on season 2, episode 10. We're going to have a link to that. And then Meantime Monday, wellness hacks. Okay. So September 30th is International Podcast Day. And we want to thank you for being our loyal listeners and hopefully our subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, please go hit the subscribe button and get other people to do the same, because guess what? We are so excited to announce we are now number 6 of all of the caregiving podcasts, the top 100. We are number 6 on the list, which we were really excited about when we got that information from Domain Authority. And then our YouTube version of our podcast, which, as you guys know, we also have this in video on our YouTube channel, is number 3. So we're feeling pretty good these days, and it's because of you guys. Okay, I love doing this podcast for you. I'll speak for my team too, who helps edit and produce this. But we love doing this for you, and we hope you find it enjoyable, but also educational and informational. And just tell friends, subscribe, as I said, keep us going, because we are looking for sponsors and things, and these numbers help us out. And it's because we have great guests, but also because we have a great audience. So again, thank you. Bouquets of love to all of you out there who listen to us. And so for this episode, our Meantime Monday Wellness Hack is on 7 brain health hacks that could possibly help you prevent Alzheimer's. Welcome to our Me Time Monday Wellness Hack. This episode, we focus on 7 wellness hacks to improve your brain health and reduce your Alzheimer's risk. Alzheimer's researchers reported in the Lancet journal there are 14 ways to modify our lifestyles to reduce our risk for Alzheimer's. In fact, by adopting healthier behaviors, studies show Alzheimer's cases could be reduced by 40%. I'm going to use my Me Time Monday 7 wellness elements to give you 7 hacks to improve your brain health and reduce your risk for dementia. Most of these hacks can be done in 7 minutes. The first one is physical wellness. For physical wellness, the number one thing to do for brain health is to get 7 to 8 hours of restorative, uninterrupted sleep. When the body goes to sleep, the brain goes to work, clearing out debris and toxins, conducting muscle and cellular repair, and modulating the emotions of the day. Studies show getting 5.5 hours or less a night impacts cognitive performance the next day. It is similar to having a 0.05 blood alcohol level. Lack of sleep can also make you gain weight, and numerous awakenings during the night can increase your Alzheimer's risk. If you are not getting 7 to 8 hours, try adding 7 minutes a night for 2 weeks, then another 7 minutes for 2 weeks until you feel you've hit your goal. Our second hack is on emotional wellness. For emotional wellness, try to see the world with rose-colored glasses. In other words, choose positivity and optimism more than being negative and pessimistic. The Global Council on Brain Health says that optimism and a positive attitude are linked to better brain health and a lower risk of dementia. Be realistic, but hopeful and positive. Challenges can make you stronger. Remember, it is the rainfalls in life that create the rainbows. If you catch yourself being negative, think of 3 positive things to replace that negative energy. Number 3 is social wellness. When it comes to social wellness, this may be the number one thing that helps you live longer and happier, or at least that is what the Harvard study has shown over the last 85 years. Other studies show that feeling lonely all the time, whether you and an older loved one living alone, or a family caregiver who feels all alone, this will increase your Alzheimer's risk by 40%. So make time to stay engaged socially. Take 7 minutes to talk on the phone, grab a quick coffee, or spend time talking to a neighbor or a coworker. You can also take 7 minutes to drive to a nearby friend's house just to say hi. I call it the joy ride. By escaping into social activity, you bring balance back to life, and balance is the secret to self-care. Now, the first element of wellness is intellectual wellness, and for that, we want you to read a book. One of the biggest risks for Alzheimer's is high blood pressure. Researchers found that 30 minutes of reading a book, especially fiction, where you fine-tune your empathy and your active listening skills, reduces inflammation and heart rates and lowers blood pressure as much as doing 30 minutes of yoga. So those who read books instead of watching TV, reading magazines, or even online news actually lived 2 years longer in one study. So our hack is to spend 7 minutes a day, or at least 7 minutes a week, where you can read a few pages of one of your favorite books, look forward to following someone else's life instead of worrying about your own. Now, our next wellness element is environmental wellness, and where you live matters. Studies over the last 15 years show air pollution can create cognitive problems and increase your Alzheimer's risk. Recent studies show, like many New York City first responders of 9/11 who breathed in the toxic debris from the fallen Twin Towers, developed Alzheimer's in their 50s and 60s. And those people who live in areas with annual wildfires increase their risk for dementia. But being in nature, whether it is a park or your own backyard, can actually reduce your Alzheimer's risk. So our hack is take 7 minutes and walk outside enjoying nature. One study found that 10 minutes walking in nature is the same as walking 30 minutes on a treadmill inside. And this can reduce your Alzheimer's risk by 40%. Now, our sixth wellness element is financial wellness. And, caregivers need to know your numbers. Here's what we mean. Dementia care costs more than other types of elder care because the disease calls for specialists who are trained in dementia and Alzheimer's. Also, Alzheimer's caregivers are in their role twice as long as caregivers of other diseases such as heart disease or cancer or MS. 9 years is the average length of time someone is caring for a loved one with dementia. So our hack is to take 7 minutes and start educating yourself on the cost of care. Also, have the family conversation about long-term care costs and wishes and what your older loved one's financial plan is for their latter part of life. 1 in 3 adults over 80 will have some type of dementia or Alzheimer's. Don't create more stress for yourself. Take those baby steps now and start planning ahead and asking the questions sooner rather than later. And finally, our last wellness element is spiritual wellness, and this includes gratitude, which is a gift we give ourselves. Research into gratitude shows it reduces depression, relieves emotional stress, and can act like our social glue, connecting us to others. It also increases our optimism and our positive outlook. And gratitude grows over time. Practicing gratitude for 4 weeks improves your mood for the next 12 weeks. Now, gratitude activates your amygdala region of the brain, which is where we house emotions, and the hippocampus, which is where we house memories in the brain. By stimulating these brain regions, we can rewire our brains to emit those feel-good hormones and emotions. So our hack is take 7 minutes a day to practice gratitude. Say what you are grateful for in the morning while taking a shower, or call a friend to say a grateful thank you, or write your feelings of gratitude in a journal to revisit these positive expressions when you're having a dark. I hope you enjoyed this Me Time Monday Wellness Hack. You can find more information in my book, Me Time Monday, the Weekly Wellness Plan to find balance and joy for a busy life, or visit MeTimeMonday.com or CaregivingClub.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Caregiving Club On Air. Please hit the subscribe button to listen to us on our newest channels, Amazon Music, SiriusXM, iHeartRadio, Pandora, as well as Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts and other listening channels. Check out all of our resources and article links on our episode guide page at caregivingclub.com. Just hit the podcast tab at the top. And you can email us with comments and questions at podcast@caregivingclub.com. Thank you again for listening. Take care and stay well.